Revenge is the action of hurting or harming someone in return for an injury or wrong that was suffered at their hands. The Yorknew City arc heavily explores Kurapika's desire for revenge, and incidentally, it becomes one of the most important story arcs within Hunter x Hunter. We experience a significant shift in tone as the theme of the arc, the setting, and the story that is told becomes more mature. Through the tension that you feel and how the story becomes sinister and darker, you can see that Togashi raised the stakes and developed his writing for something very complex. This arc results in the development and maturity of several characters, especially Kurapika, as both the positive and negative aspects of his revenge are explored in depth. Some would say that the way that Togashi elevates his storytelling in this arc blurs the line between a shonen story, which is predominantly aimed towards teenagers, with the seinen demographic, which is aimed towards young adults, and is known for darker and more mature stories. Prior to this arc, there were hints of Hunter x Hunter having a darker undertone, but during the Yorknew City arc, these dark undertones are capitalized upon. So many different stories simultaneously occur during the Yorknew City arc, each story being led by a group of characters with their own individual goals. Like Gon, who is continuing to search for his father, we get the introduction of concepts which foreshadow the Greed Island arc, as well as the mysterious group of antagonists, the Phantom Troupe, finally being revealed, along with their incredibly popular fan-favorite leader Chrollo Lucilfer. During this arc, we understand how Hunter x Hunter implements organized criminal networks through its own interpretation of the mafia underworld, and how individuals fall into this criminal network through the way that they were nurtured and through the environment which surrounded them and shaped their personalities. During the Heaven's Arena arc, we were introduced to the new concept which is called Nen, and in this arc more of this unique power system is explored. Togashi demonstrates during the Yorknew City arc how different Nen users uniquely express their own Nen abilities, and how complex these abilities can actually become. And because of this, it easily makes Nen one of the most unique and well thought out power systems within shonen anime and manga. So without further ado, let's get into the Yorknew City arc and understand how human greed results in bloodshed, scheming against one another, and losing sight of one's purpose. The Yorknew City arc begins in chapter 64 and ends in chapter 119, spanning a total of 55 chapters. It picks up immediately after the Heaven's Arena arc. We learn that Gon has been away from his home of Whale Island for 6 months, and he intends to return there with Killua. He receives a warm welcome from his Aunt Mito and his grandmother. Killua is introduced to his family. After hearing Gon's intentions to begin searching for his father after a month's rest, Mito brings out a mysterious small box, which appears to have belonged to Jin, Gon's father. He had told her to give this to Gon after he had passed the hunter exam. Once Gon uses Nen, the box immediately opens up and he discovers a message from his father on a cassette tape. Jin challenges Gon to find him, the very father who had left him behind in pursuit of his own desires. He also leaves a clue to his whereabouts in the form of a Joystation console, along with a memory card and a ring. Of course, the Joystation console and the memory card are shaped after the original PlayStation. Meanwhile, we learn that Kurapika has been hard at work. We discovered that he has been learning Nen from a master for the past 6 months. He has also been looking for a job with someone who is connected to the auction which is taking place in Yorknew City. He wants to work in close proximity to this auction because he has heard that his clan's scarlet eyes are being sold there. If the eyes are there, then there is every chance that the Phantom Troupe will also be there, and it is the perfect opportunity for Kurapika to exact his revenge. After successfully passing a few tests during an interview, he becomes the bodyguard to a girl called Nostrad. She has a strange hobby of collecting body parts, as well as being the daughter of a mafia boss. Meanwhile, after Gon and Killua examine the memory card left behind by Jin, they discover a save file for a game called Greed Island. They begin to research and look for any information relating to this game. They find out that Greed Island is a rare game with only 100 copies ever being produced. The requirement to play it is to be able to utilize Nen. The boys discover that the game is being sold in the southern part of the auction which is being held in Yorknew City. Since they are already going there to meet back up with Kurapika and Leorio on September 1st, they decide to purchase a copy there. Upon reaching Yorknew City and finding Leorio, he decides to join them on their quest to find a copy of the game. During this time, we are also introduced to the Phantom Troupe, who are planning to steal every item at the auction. They intend to do so by being disguised as members of the mafia. Kurapika's first assignment as a bodyguard is to be stationed outside the auction building, while the auction is taking place. Eventually, the Phantom Troupe attack the first auction. Inside the building, the people who are working alongside Kurapika are killed. After this unpredictable bloodshed that was unleashed by the Phantom Troupe, They leave no traces behind of any stolen items or dead bodies before they leave the auction room in a hot air balloon. They are discovered by the Mafia, who follow the hot air balloon to a canyon outside the city. One of the Phantom Troupe's members, called Uvagin, begins to easily slaughter the Mafia members who don't know how to use Nen. Kurapika and the rest of the bodyguards tasked to protect Nostrad watch the slaughter from afar. We then learn that the 10 leaders of the Mafia, called the 10 Dons, have sent a elite group of Nen users, who are dubbed as the Shadow Beasts, to hunt and find the Phantom Troupe. Uvagin fights these elite Nen users on his own. Despite being outmatched, he easily kills them with his superior Nen abilities and his brutality. However, the Shadow Beasts do manage to paralyze Uvagin. Kurapika, who is watching, is overwhelmed by his hatred for the Phantom Troupe, and he wants to confront Uvagin alone. However, one of the bodyguards who is working alongside Kurapika, called Melody, ends up calming him down. Kurapika ends up thinking rationally and takes advantage of Uvagin, who is now paralyzed. They successfully capture him using Kurapika's Nen ability called Change Ale. The other members of the Phantom Troupe try to stop one of their own being kidnapped, but they are interrupted by the arrival of more members of the Shadow Beasts. After being captured, Uvagin is brought back to the Nostrad base for questioning. During this time, Kurapika temporarily leaves his post as a bodyguard in order to meet up with Hisoka. After the Phantom Troupe defeat the remaining members of the Shadow Beasts, they eventually track down Uvagin's whereabouts, and they disguise themselves as Mafia members and kill Nostrad's bodyguards. After being freed, Uvagin swears that he is going to get his revenge on the Chain Dude, and he begins searching for him. Meanwhile, after Gon, Killua and Leorio realize that the agreed island copies will be beginning their starting bid at 8.9 billion, they decide to come up with ways to make money. Leorio offers to make money by hosting a arm wrestling contest with Gon. Many individuals partake in the arm wrestling contest, assuming that they would win against a 12-year-old child, but Gon ends up surprising everybody, including Mafia members who realize how strong Gon is. The Mafia members eventually invite Gon and the others to a underground gathering where they are offering a reward to find the Phantom Troupe members. While this is going on, another newly introduced member of the Phantom Troupe, called Shellnock, tracks down the Chain Dude for Uvagin. He does so by using the internet and the exclusive Hunter website. When Kurapika finds out that he is being tracked, he waits for Uvagin's arrival, as they agree to fight outside the city. Kurapika and Uvagin eventually fight outside Yorknew City. They exchange blows, and Kurapika ends up using a ability called Change Ale. He had designed this specifically for the Phantom Troupe because it allows him to suppress his opponent's strength and Nen. As well as this, we learn that when Kurapika's eyes become the scarlet color, he can use all the Nen categories at 100%, and this ability is dubbed as Emperor Time. After Kurapika wins the battle, he questions Uvagin. After receiving little to no answers, and without Melody being there to calm him down, he is overwhelmed by his rage, and he murders Uvagin and buries him in the desert. Meanwhile, Gon, Killua and Leorio don't manage to get any information on the spiders. They decide to take out a loan by exchanging Gon's hunter license to pay for information on them. Gon and Killua eventually attend a street auction. They are able to discover by using their Gyo ability they can see Nen that is being emitted from some of the items. Through this tactic, they are able to distinguish rare items from useless items, so they start bidding on items to make money. They eventually meet an expert at bidding called Zepile, who prevents them from getting ripped off. He is impressed by their ability to get rare items, and he decides to help them to make money. Back with the Phantom Troupe, they suspect that Uvagin must have been killed by the Chain Dude. Nobunaga and Machi try to confirm this and find any trace of the Chain Dude. Gon and Killua follow them to their base after being tipped off by an informant. They are easily captured by the more experienced members of the Phantom Troupe, and they are interrogated to see if they know anything about Kurapika. Nobunaga is impressed by their abilities and holds them as captives until Chrollo arrives. Nobunaga is that impressed that he is willing to ask his leader for permission for Gon and Killua to join the spiders. Despite being trapped in a room with only one exit, Gon and Killua manage to escape from Nobunaga by breaking out through one of the walls. Killua eventually deduces that the Chain Dude that the spiders wanted information on is indeed Kurapika. Both Gon and Killua, who were impressed by Kurapika, decide to learn Nen from him in order to become stronger in a shorter amount of time. The underground auction then begins to go ahead as planned. The Mafia have hired professional help in the form of assassins who are able to use Nen. Among them is the Zodic family. They have been tasked to find and kill the Phantom Troupe. Neon Nostrad, who Kurapika and the rest of the bodyguards were tasked to protect, ends up escaping from her bodyguards. She plans to attend the auction because she sees through her father's lies. Chrollo ends up recognizing her and picks her up. She ends up predicting his fortune, as we realize that her Nen ability is that of a fortune teller's. Upon reading the prophecy of Chrollo, he begins to cry, as it confirms Uvagin has died. He then ends up stealing Neon's ability and knocks her unconscious. He then tries to plan his escape from the auction building. After killing most of the assassins hired to take out the troop members, Chrollo is confronted by Killua's father Silver and his grandfather Zeno. The other troop members begin killing using mafia members to avenge Uvagin. Meanwhile, Zeno and Silver fight Chrollo in a intense high-level Nen battle. Chrollo ends up being injured, but he is still alive. They eventually stop fighting as it is revealed that the spiders hired Illumi to kill the 10 Dons. After they are killed, the mafia can no longer make payment for the hit that they placed on the spiders, so Silver and Zeno immediately stop fighting Chrollo and back out from the situation. The Phantom Troupe manages to fake corpses using Kortopi's ability, and they also restart the auction pretending to be the 10 Dons. They end up auctioning off fake copies of real items using Kortopi's Nen. The Phantom Troupe once again end up outsmarting the mafia. Later, by using the stolen fortune-telling ability, Chrollo creates prophecies for all of the Phantom Troupe members. It reveals that if they act normally and proceed as planned, then half of them will die in the coming weeks at the hands of the Chain Dude. Chrollo orders the spiders to leave Yorknew City. However, Hisoka alters his fortune using his Nen ability Texture Surprise, so it ends up reading that Hisoka is being manipulated by the Chain user, and if the troupe leave Yorknew City they will die. This ends up forcing the group to stay. We learn why Hisoka is being deceitful and helping Kurapika behind the scenes. This is because he desires to fight the leader of the Phantom Troupe, Chrollo, on a one-on-one battle. Hisoka ends up texting Kurapika that the dead bodies that were found were indeed fakes and the Phantom Troupe are still alive. Eventually, Gon, Killua, Kurapika and Leorio are reunited, and they decide to track down the Phantom Troupe on their own, after the mafia cancelled the bounty that they placed on them. After learning that the spiders are from Meteor City, they end up finding the hideout of the Phantom Troupe through using Melody's hearing ability. The group follow the spiders, but Gon and Killua are captured again. Kurapika formulates a plan that he ends up relaying to the captured Gon and Killua. Kurapika ends up capturing Chrollo, and a ransom note is left for the Phantom Troupe. The ransom note demands that the memories that Pakunoda extracted from Gon and Killua remain secret, or else Chrollo will be killed. They then arrange a hostage exchange over the phone. Kurapika allows Pakunoda to meet up with him first, to confirm that Chrollo is still alive. During the meeting, Kurapika uses this opportunity to use his Judgment Chain ability on both Chrollo and Pakunoda's heart. Each Judgment Chain has a specific condition placed onto each of their hearts. For Chrollo, if he is to use Nen, then the chain will kill him, while the other that is placed on Pakunoda will kill her if she reveals Kurapika's abilities to the spiders. After the hostage exchange successfully occurs, Pakunoda ends up sacrificing herself by using her Nen ability called Memory Bomb to relay all of the information that she knows about Kurapika to the rest of the spiders. She hopes that her sacrifice will save the lives of the remaining members. The arc ends up concluding after Hisoka is disappointed when he learns that Chrollo can no longer use Nen, and he decides to give up on his pursuit to fight him. This is a really brief, abridged summary of all of the events that occur in the Yorknew City arc. Now we'll be going over the various different aspects of world building which are conveyed to us during this arc by Togashi, examining any similarities to our own real world, as well as trying to understand any references to symbolism which Togashi may have implemented in order to expand the world of Hunter x Hunter. Starting off, there are many parallels between the fictional Yorknew City to the real world New York City. One of the most interesting ones is the Mafia. The Nostrad family which Kurapika ends up working for as a bodyguard is based on the real world Cosa Nostra Sicilian Mafia, obviously having Italian roots. They successfully ran their criminal organization in New York. The 10 Dons are also based on the infamous top 5 New York Mafia families. In Hunter x Hunter, the Mafia represents a hierarchical structure similar to the Hunter organization. However, the Mafia are underground players involved in organized crime. During this arc, Togashi highlights that even criminals follow a code and some sort of structure. They exist to meet human demand for distasteful taboo material objects, which are not available in the mainstream. An example of this is the selling of human body parts, like the Kurta Clan's Scarlet Eyes. If the wealthy elite's hedonism and moral nihilism didn't exist, then there would be no demand for the Mafia to sell these taboo and unethical items. The Mafia also represent our ego and humanity's thirst for power. Some humans try to work to the top of whatever hierarchical structure, even if it is a criminal hierarchy. This is represented by Light Nostrad, as he uses his daughter's Nen ability to climb the Mafia ranks, and he does so for the sole purpose of gaining more power. This character is even willing to manipulate and use his daughter, his own flesh and blood. When he is confronted by Zenji, another mob boss, he highlights that the only reason Nostrad worked up the Mafia hierarchy so fast from a low rank is because of his daughter's prophecy ability. You can see that Zenji is a loudmouth and he doesn't have the best appearance, as opposed to the cool, calm and collected Light Nostrad. Togashi here clearly wants his audience to judge a character by their intentions and not their appearance. Nostrad intends to manipulate his daughter for more power, easily making him one of the most despisable Mafia bosses, even more so than Zenji. So it is comic justice when Chrollo steals her Nen ability, freeing her from her father's manipulation, and consequently putting a stop to his thirst for more power. Another real-world parallel that Togashi draws upon is mainstream religion. We can speculate that Chrollo represents the Antichrist with his ups upside down cross and his 12 disciples, which are the spider members. In mysticism and numerology, Jesus is represented as the number 8. Jesus rose on the 8th day after he was crucified. The 8th day marks the beginning of a new life. Chrollo and Kurapika represent the number 8 as Chrollo is 26 years old, 2 plus 6 which is 8, and Kurapika is 17 years old, 1 plus 7 which is 8. Chrollo's last name is Lucilfer, which is also 8 letters, and learning through a Hunter x Hunter data book, Chrollo is a Scorpio, which is the 8th zodiac sign. The Phantom Troupe, which Chrollo is the leader of, is also referred to as the Spiders, which we all know have 8 legs. The number 8 and its relation to the Antichrist symbolize Chrollo's ideology. In Christianity and Islam, it is believed that the Antichrist will imitate the Messiah by deceiving the people and claiming to be Jesus himself. Instead of giving power to his disciples to cast out unclean spirits as Jesus did, Chrollo seems to collect them through how he steals other people's Nen abilities. This is what his Nen represents: demonic spirits stolen and preserved by Chrollo. He could then use these demons to overpower his opponents, rather than being gifted his powers from God like Jesus. In addition, there is also Chrollo's view on death, which he relays to Kurapika while he is captured in the car with him. Chrollo himself has accepted that his life is of no significance, and he has accepted his own death. Melody even comments that he is indeed telling the truth. He welcomes death as a liberating outcome from the suffering of the mortal world. This is how he justifies killing others. He believes that the people that he has killed should be thanking him, as they have left for a better place now. This is the opposite of Jesus, as he saved and preserved life, even being known to resurrect the dead, heal the blind, and bringing life to clay birds. Hisoka's character was even alluded to being a Judas, but unlike Judas, he doesn't want to betray Chrollo for any monetary or material gain. His desire is to confront and fight Chrollo as the leader of the Phantom Troupe. This is to satisfy his bloodlust and to test his abilities. In the context of Chrollo being an antichrist, his betrayal could be symbolized as heroic, if he did indeed manage to kill Chrollo. And to add another point about Hisoka's character, when the other spider members become fatalistic when they read their prophecies, he uses his Nen ability Texture Surprise to change his own prophecy. He acts as a metaphor for humans making their own truths and being in charge of their own fate. And of course, I have to talk about Kurapika and his holy chain, which is in the shape of a cross, and he uses this to heal wounds. Kurapika uses limitations and conditions on himself, similar to a religious vow, and he does this in order to make his abilities stronger. In many religions, you have to restrict yourself and control your desires and devote yourself to God in order to gain spiritual enlightenment. Also, Kurapika's Emperor Time ability is similar to the idea of enlightenment in Buddhism. Kurapika is able to break away from his Nen type of a conjurer and use all other types of Nen at 100% ability. He removes all restrictions and achieves enlightenment. In addition to this, the name of Kurapika's abilities also have religious symbolism. His Nen abilities are called Judgment Chain and Holy Chain. By getting vengeance for the murder of his clan, Kurapika believes he is bringing justice by killing his oppressors and restoring honor to his fallen clan. He is behaving like a vengeful god. By using his Judgment Chain, he is enacting divine justice onto the oppressors. I believe that Togashi has done all of this intentionally to give his story more depth and build a more detailed world, one that we can draw parallels from and to compare to our own world. Togashi also emphasizes environmental and social factors which end up shaping his character's values. Whale Island is a wilderness with a very small human population, which reflects Gon's personality of being wild and free. This is a contrast to Killua, as he came from a structured environment and he was trained as an assassin from a young age. Togashi purposefully juxtaposes the upbringing and the environment in which the characters were raised in. Like between Gon and Killua, there is a distinction between the two of them and their family atmosphere. Gon's family is very caring and loving, while Killua had a very harsh, cold and calculated upbringing, and this is because his whole life had been chosen for him. He is told that he will be the next head of the Zordic family, and it is imperative for him to learn the family business by learning assassin skills as effectively as possible. And this is compared to Gon, who is completely free and decides what he wants to do with his own life, which we know from his desire is to find his father and to become a professional hunter like his old man. In regards to the Phantom Troupe, they are from Meteor City, which is a junkyard city inhabited by outcasts. People who live there do not exist in official records. Growing up in these conditions shapes the Spiders, as they represent organized chaos and anarchy, as opposed to the Mafia, who represent structured criminality. Due to being abandoned by the outside world, people who are raised in Meteor City have a different concept of life and have differing values. After Uvagin massacres the Mafia in the canyon, one of their mobsters survives and he threatens the Spider's family members. Phaeton mockingly asks him what a family is. This shows those who grow up in the environment of Meteor City have no concept of what we would consider normal. The inhabitants of Meteor City share a bond described as thinner than water and yet thicker than blood. This explains why the spiders mourned the loss of Uvagin, and their leader Chrollo even ended up crying for him. The Phantom Troupe have no issue with stealing and killing, because they were brought up in an environment where they didn't have anything, and they had no identity of their own. They did not grow up with normal moral values. This makes them moral nihilists. These environmental and social factors shaped the Phantom Troupe. That's why even if Killua is successful in killing every member of the Phantom Troupe, if he does not address the conditions of Meteor City, then more like them will appear. As the Phantom Troupe are not a group of thieves or a collection of individuals, their group represents an ideology, and this ideology was shaped and formed in Meteor City. Chrollo represents this ideology when he says that his life holds no meaning, so he is useless as a hostage. Kurapika is faced with this ideology when he realizes that he may be able to kill the leader of the troop, but it will not stop them. This is why Uvagin refused to give up any information about the Phantom Troupe before he died. His silence is credited to the indoctrination from the ideology that they believe in. You may be able to kill the Phantom Troupe, but you cannot kill the idea behind it. The same environmental factors which helped to shape the Phantom Troupe are now shaping others in Meteor City. This helps to explain why the Mafia cancelled the hit on the spiders when they learnt where they were from, because most of the people who the Mafia hire as assassins or hitmen are maladjusted people from Meteor City. Meteor City is mentioned again in an upcoming arc where it is explored further, so it's definitely not the last time that I'll be bringing it up. Some people consider Gon and Killua's involvement in this arc to be shoehorned into a story which is really about Kurapika's revenge, but in my opinion, like the previous arcs, their involvement is very significant, because their innocence is contrasted against the human greed and dishonesty that they encounter. Through taking part in the auctions, they witness how people will do anything to minimize their losses and maximize their earnings. They will partake in a number of underhanded tactics in order to deceive one another, and this ultimately ends up complicating the very simple process of buying and selling goods. There really is no such thing as a honest transaction. We also learn during this portion of the arc that inanimate objects also emit aura. Through Gon and Killua using Yo, they are able to easily find rare items. It is Gon who notices that someone else called Zephyle is bidding on the exact same rare items that they are. Through using their tactic, they were able to secure 3 out of 4 items which were emitting a Nen aura. Because they can't sell these auctions at the classic auction, they are forced to go to an antiques dealer. The dealer offers to buy their items for 500,000, but Zephyle steps in and tells the boys that the dealer isn't offering them a fair price, and he is taking advantage of their naivety and their inexperience, literally trying to take candy from a baby. For greed, humans are even willing to take advantage of children. Zephyle teaches Gon and Killua how traders forge items by using techniques like welding, exposing, and sidestepping. We also learn how Zephyle was able to identify the rare items which were emitting Nen aura, without himself being able to use Nen. He had been using a technique called sizing up. Gon and Killua themselves can learn to use this ability in order to intuitively detect the quality even within people. Gon and Killua use the sidestepping technique in order to escape from Nobunaga, and through their interactions with this newly introduced character Zephyle, Togashi is able to implement maturity and growth for Gon and Killua in a story which isn't even centered around them. The two boys are in a very complicated world, and it isn't straightforward. They both have to be constantly stepping out of their comfort zones and embracing new situations and concepts in the pursuit of constant progression. As a side note, Togashi during this arc also foreshadows how Nen emitting items are more durable and can be used in Nen battles. We see this through Chrollo using Ben's knife in his fight against Silver and Zeno Zoldyck. Now, I want to turn my attention over to the individual characters who feature within this arc. I want to focus on understanding their motives and their reasoning behind their actions. Let's start off with none other than Kurapika, who I feel like this arc was written for. A quote from Star Wars that Yoda, the Jedi Master, states is very relevant to Kurapika's character. Yoda says that fear leads to anger, and anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. This quote perfectly encapsulates what Kurapika's character experiences during the Yorknew City arc. His suffering is caused by his overwhelming hatred for the Phantom Troupe. Togashi pays particular attention to this in the Yorknew City arc in order to make Kurapika the archetypal Avenger. However, you have to ask yourself, is Kurapika a simple Avenger, or has Togashi made a purposeful effort in this arc to make Kurapika's character more nuanced than just a Avenger? And this is exactly what I want to cover in this breakdown of Kurapika's character. The first thing to note is that there is a significant change that occurs between the Kurapika who we have seen up until this point and the character who we see 6 months later, now knowing Nen and working for the Nostrad family. There is a pronounced shift in his personality and his psychology when it comes to Kurapika's character in the Yorknew City arc. We get a brief glimpse of the anger and hatred that Kurapika holds for the Phantom Troupe during the Hunter exam arc, when a prisoner during the third phase of the exam pretends to be a member of the Phantom Troupe. You can see the change in Kurapika's mood and his personality whenever the Phantom Troupe is mentioned. In some instances, his eyes even turn into the scarlet color. The change in eye color that occurs to members of the Kurta Clan when they are emotionally distressed. I feel that this change of eye colour is a great homage to the Kurta Clan, because the Phantom Troupe had killed all of the Kurta Clan for their scarlet eyes. When their eyes turn this scarlet colour, they are described as being more beautiful than even the most precious diamond in the world, and for Kurapika there is so much hatred behind the beauty of his eyes. When the spiders are mentioned, it is like Kurapika is possessed by a raging demon. Because he is the last of his clan members, nobody else will truly be able to understand the pain and anguish that he is feeling. Typically, Kurapika is very intelligent and he is one of the more rational characters, so it is a striking contrast to see him give in to his emotions and his feelings of hatred to the extent that it becomes self-destructive. We see Kurapika, who is about to act on his self-destructive urge to confront Uvagin and the Phantom Troupe members on his own, until he is stopped by Melody when she uses her Nen ability to calm the enraged Kurapika. In this instance, if he continued to be overwhelmed by his emotions, he would have confronted the Phantom Troupe and it would have led to his death. It is an effective way for Togashi to show us how affected Kurapika is by the tragic massacre of his clan. Sadly, we are forced to experience this change of this character who is usually intelligent and very compassionate, and someone who has a defined set of values and a strong moral compass, being broken down by his feelings of revenge and hatred because of the heartless actions of a criminal group. In the Yorknew City arc, Kurapika is a far cry from the character who accompanied Leorio and Gon in order to rescue Killua from his family. In that short period of time, the character that we come to know is completely different to this character that we see here. At the end of the Zoldyck family arc, everybody innocently goes in their own way. Personally, I didn't think too into what Kurapika was doing, but upon further inspection, since the very beginning of the series, he was on a path of revenge. He had to get his hunter's license in order to gain more information about the Phantom Troupe and to open more doors for himself so that he could get closer to the Phantom Troupe and to make himself stronger in order to encounter them one day. By following this path of revenge, Kurapika puts at risk his humanity, as it is clearly stated that he has not killed anyone up until this point, and in the Yorknew City arc, his revenge leads him to committing his first murder. Taking the life of another is a heavy burden to place upon your soul, and this clearly highlights that Kurapika is not this innocent, infallible character that we see at the start of the series. When he forms his friendships with Gon, Killua and Leorio, the relationship that the four of them share together is deceptive, because when we explore each of the individual characters, they are all flawed in some way, and they all have a tendency to give in to their emotions and to even commit wrong, which completely subverted my expectations, as I thought they were a group of happy-go-lucky, cheerful characters. Out of the four characters, Togashi decides to dissect and break down Kurapika's character and lay him bare for us all to see in this arc. In the subsequent arcs, we do get a similar treatment with Gon and Killua, and even Leorio to some extent. I'm incredibly interested by the way that Togashi writes his characters, how after first inspection you typically apply typical storytelling tropes to them, and personality traits which we have seen so many times before to them, but as the story continues, Togashi betrays your expectations, and he leaves you feeling dumbfounded through the way that he exposes the darker sides of his characters, and how this darkness has always been there from the very beginning. We see the evil in the good, and we see the seeds of these character dissections planted well before they occur. Another example is how Wing was fearful of teaching Gon Nen. He even likened him to being a monster, and we see this very description of a monster being actualized during the Chimera Ant arc, after Gon can no longer contain his emotions through his anger and hatred that he feels towards Pito. Kurapika's revenge leads him to joining the Mafia and the despicable Nostrad family. Neon Nostrad, despite her cute appearance, has a disgusting taboo hobby. She collects human body parts. To describe her character, she is very self-centered, materialistic, and lacks empathy. An example of her twisted behavior is when she had ordered an actual dead body to be put on display inside her mansion. This body had belonged to a former bodyguard who had failed in his duties. She clearly had an elite and very sheltered upbringing. Every one of her desires was satisfied, and any of the wrongdoing that she had committed was masked with money. It is very easy to just judge the characters that Togashi illustrates and writes by their appearances or their first impressions, but these surface level inspections pale in comparison to the truth about the characters that Togashi writes. Neon's father, Light Nostrad, is no better than her, as he is using his daughter's Nen ability to climb up the Mafia ranks for power, like I had mentioned before. Kurapika stoops to the level of working for this Mafia family, and in doing so he is taking part in a corrupt underworld system. From what we have seen up until this point, Kurapika is a compassionate person, and someone who values the friendships and the bonds that he forms with others. However, while being a part of this Mafia family, he is not able to form a bond with anyone except from Melody. He didn't really form any substantial relationships in the Yorknew City arc with any of the new characters that were introduced. This is shown firsthand by his lack of empathy that he feels when the other bodyguards working for the Nostrad family are killed. Kurapika shows little to no compassion for them. He had even used the death of Aizoline as an advantage to become the head bodyguard of the Nostrad family. The only comment that he makes about the situation is that he didn't expect to become the head bodyguard in such a short amount of time. His desire for revenge and his feelings of hatred have turned him into someone who is very selfish and egotistical. He has adopted the philosophy that to confront evil, one must be able to do evil. At this point, you have to hope that he hasn't been consumed by his dark feelings, because the hatred that he feels will ultimately leave him with an empty void that he will find difficult to fill. This empty void will prevent him from finding inner peace and will ultimately result in his suffering. The hatred is matched by his motivation to bring justice to his fallen clan members. Togashi highlights this during Kurapika's flashback during his Nen training sequence with his master Izunavi. After his Nen training is completed, we learn that he is a conjurer type. He chooses to conjure chains because he believes that certain people need to be dragged to hell. At this point, we are convinced that he is a archetypal shonen avenger with a single-minded goal that he is narrowly fixated upon to the point that it is dangerous. The fire that burns within Kurapika gives him a fierce determination, which leads him to undertake extreme measures, which he justifies as being necessary. This is demonstrated when his master Izunavi explains that conjuring unbreakable chains is impossible. However, if Kurapika were to make a contract with himself in which he imposes strict conditions and swears to abide by stricter limitations, then the greater the power that he will gain. To explain the huge power surge that Kurapika has within 6 months, we learned that he had made such a contract with himself in order to gain a substantial amount of power in a short amount of time. He had done so by using his ability called Judgment Chain to wrap a blade around his heart to increase his Nen by setting conditions and limitations upon himself. He explains this to Gon when Gon wonders how on earth he has gained so much power and such powerful Nen abilities. This is like his religious vow to avenge his fallen brethren and to collect their eyes, even if he has to risk his own life to do so. He may have the typical trope of being on the path of revenge, but Togashi challenges certain shonen tropes, especially with the way that Kurapika becomes so powerful in such a short amount of time. I mean, quite simply, we are left surprised by his Nen mastery at the Nostrad mansion during his job interview. When you see quick power-ups, they are usually associated with the villain or antagonist. For example, Hody Jones when he uses energy steroids during the Fishman Island arc in One Piece. Or to counter Sasuke's Mangekyo Sharingan, Danzo uses Izanagi from the Uchiha eyes attached to his arm. In contrast, the Phantom Troupe obtain their Nen powers through training or life and death situations, so their abilities and powers are explained through natural and organic progression. Even Killua's father notes that Chrollo has gotten stronger from the last time that they fought. This is ultimately another example of Togashi subverting some well-established shonen tropes and cliches, while also giving his story a unique and natural flow to it, which doesn't feel forced. Because of Kurapika placing limits and conditions on himself, he has obtained greater Nen powers. Through making that religious vow, he has obtained the power in order to avenge his clan. However, through Kurapika obtaining these Nen abilities, this symbolizes that he needs to restrict his identity and who he once was. Through placing a chain on his own heart, it connotates that he needs to forcibly change his personality and restrain his conscience. He needs to become someone who lacks empathy and remorse and sympathy. When he says that he conjures chains to drag individuals to hell, the chain that he placed on his own heart is dragging himself to hell. Revenge indeed is a double-edged sword, as it takes a huge emotional toll on a character, especially one that has a conscience. We see this emotional toll during Kurapika's fight against Uvagin. He is angered by his opponent when he realizes that he doesn't even remember the names of his victims, and how loyal he is to the Phantom Troupe, and won't give up any information on them. The enemies that Kurapika holds so much hatred towards appear to have a code of honor, as Uvagin demonstrates the loyalty that they have for each other. During this fight, Kurapika states that the smell of blood is throwing his senses into disarray. This is leading him to lose control of his psyche. Ultimately, Kurapika's actions are harming his own soul. When he uses the Judgment Chain on Uvagin, and he is still persistent not to give up any information about the spiders, it proves how much of a close bond the members of the Phantom Troupe share with each other. Like I mentioned previously, they are a group of thieves, but it is their ideology which gives them power. Because they were born from the environmental and social conditions of Meteor City, they are a force to be reckoned with. Kurapika cannot end what the Phantom Troupe stand for, because if he kills the members of the Phantom Troupe, then others will appear in their place with the exact same ideology to replace them. You may sympathize with Kurapika's quest for revenge, since his clan was massacred horrifically, but you have to ask yourself, is this quest for revenge justified? Typically in our world, and even in the world of Hunter x Hunter, justice is usually carried out by an impartial third party, who follow the law and order of the society, relying on a judge to pass righteous judgment down onto a criminal. We rely on the criminal justice system to lay down its hammer on those who commit moral wrongdoings, both to individuals and society as a whole. This law and order that we rely upon gives society structure and meaning. Without it, there would be anarchy and chaos. Justice is rational and impartial. There is no bias. Vengeance, on the other hand, is emotional and personal, and filled with bias. When Kurapika meets with Hisoka Sokka tells him that he had killed and replaced the former 4th member of the Phantom Troupe a few years ago. What this proves is that some of the current members of the Phantom Troupe may not have even taken part in the Kurta Clan massacre, but we know that Kurapika doesn't care about this fact. Ever since the beginning of the Hunter exam arc, when he is on the ship sailing to the exam location, he tells the ship's captain that his ultimate goal is to kill every last member of the Phantom Troupe. Is Kurapika justified in killing members of the Phantom Troupe who didn't even take part in the massacre of the Kurta Clan? If he is killing people innocent of the crime he is accusing them of, then this isn't justified. Kurapika's feelings of revenge will not solve anything, and it will only lead to Kurapika feeling emptiness in the end. The protagonists that feature within Togashi's stories are usually morally grey. Togashi did indeed give Kurapika a very dark goal, as he is targeting villains or even characters who could be considered as anti-heroes. This adds complexity to his character, and we know that Kurapika doesn't take pleasure in killing. We can see this in his despondent look in his eyes after he has killed Uvogin. However, his hatred and his feelings of vengeance force him to continue on this path, because he has already sacrificed so much to get to this point. He had developed his nen and he had integrated himself within the underworld. He continues his suffering, but we know all too well that the path that he is on will never give him closure or inner peace. It may sound wishy-washy, but the only way that he will attain closure is through forgiveness and understanding. Like I mentioned before, upon first inspection, Kurapika appears to be intelligent and very caring, and you can see that he is like this because he has known what it feels like to be loved and to love another. The extent of the hatred that he feels proves that he had a strong and deep bond with the other members of his clan. He is ultimately suffering on this path of revenge because he can't let go of these bonds that he has formed. After the Phantom Troupe end up faking their deaths and leaving replacement corpses using Kotopi's ability, Kurapika returns to the second family that he has formed. He goes to meet his friends Gon, Killua and Leorio in the park. Gon mentions that the spiders are dead, and Kurapika can now focus on his other goal of collecting the clan's scarlet eyes. During this very rare and brief moment, we see Kurapika smile and actually have a joyous moment during the Yorknew City arc. In this scene, he had a moment of relief from his suffering. Even we as an audience can understand that it isn't healthy for Kurapika to go down this route, and he needs to surround himself with the company of people who value and love him, like his newfound friends do. He was able to build a deep connection with Gon and the others, despite not having known them for a long period of time. This proves that he still has that kind, gentle and sympathetic nature within him. Later on, Chrollo also notices Kurapika's ability to form deep bonds during the hostage exchange. During that hostage exchange situation, Kurapika is more concerned with the safety of his friends, rather than giving in to his feelings of revenge by killing Chrollo and thus endangering the lives of his friends. He clearly doesn't want to lose the connections that he has built again with these characters. The friendships that he has formed have served to fill a void within Kurapika's life. We can understand that the psychology of Kurapika is far more nuanced than the hateful, furious and determined avenger that Togashi tries to portray him as at the beginning of this arc. We discover the nuance in Kurapika's character through the weakness that he feels through the bonds that he has formed with others. His relationships with Gon, Killua and Leorio humanize Kurapika's character. You also know that Kurapika hasn't entirely sold his soul for this quest of revenge. If he had, then he wouldn't have cared about the lives of his friends and he would have sacrificed them in order to kill the members of the Phantom Troupe. Wrapping up my thoughts on Kurapika and his involvement in this arc, I ask myself if he will continue on this path of darkness, which will ultimately lead him to be consumed by his hate. Will he lose this moral compass that he has, and the compassion that he shows for others? I hope that Kurapika can see past his feelings of revenge, and allow the relationships that he has formed with his friends to bring him some closure, and some light to the end of this tunnel. It remains to be seen whether or not Kurapika will have this enlightening moment, where he will reflect upon his actions, and his feelings of revenge and hatred, which act as emotional shackles for his character. We have to see if he gives in to his revenge and kills the other members of the Phantom Troupe, or learns to preserve his humanity by not stooping to their level. Let's now look at one of the main antagonists of this arc, and the leader of the Phantom Troupe. Yes, I'm talking about Chrollo Lucilfer. Villains usually complement the heroes. Like the protagonist, they have an extensive backstory or an interesting motivation. When I think of a well-written villain within the shonen genre, I recall characters like Sosuke Aizen or Light Yagami. In order to write a complex and well-written villain, the author must go in depth into their strengths and their vices, and how these two dynamics have a direct consequence on the villain's personality traits. Villains are incredibly interesting to analyze because they can be written to be relatable or realistic. Despite not being able to agree with their sinister plans and their evil actions, you can somehow sympathize with them on a human level when you understand their backstory, which explains how they became a villain. In the case of Chrollo Lucilfer, he is an enigma because whenever we see him, it is clear that he has detached himself from his emotions. He is difficult to read, and he doesn't give off any form of aura which would give away his intentions. This results in him coming across as being very calm and unflinching, as he has disassociated himself from his environment. This results in his character being very mysterious. There is a certain level of allure to a character like this. You begin to feel curious about the unknown nature of Chrollo. What are his true intentions? What is the explanation of of the mystery behind his character. I believe that Togashi made him like this on purpose, so that we try to dig deeper and analyze the characteristics beyond the intense, sinister eyes and the dark, edgy appearance that he has. We are first introduced to Chrollo during a group meeting with the other members of the Phantom Troupe in an abandoned area outside of Yorknew City. The Phantom Troupe are awaiting orders and they contemplate what items that they are going to steal from the auction. This is when Chrollo orders the spiders to steal everything and to eliminate anyone who gets in their way. Uvagin wonders if Chrollo is serious, as the auction is run by mafia gangs from around the world. Chrollo is confident that the spiders have both the physical and mental endurance to overcome any obstacle that may come in their way. We quickly learn that Chrollo values individuals who are skilled and strong above everyone else. This is shown when he is pleased with Uvagin's answer after he had asked him if he is afraid. Also, he allows Isoka to do as he pleases, and even though Kurapika kills Uvagin, Machi mentions Chrollo wants to recruit him. If you consider how the Phantom Troupe is structured and how the individuals are recruited, you can become a member if you defeat and replace one of the spiders, once again proving how much he values the skilled and the strong. Another way to gain entry into the Phantom Troupe is if Chrollo is impressed by your capabilities and approves of your strength. Through his actions and his beliefs, we can assume that Chrollo adheres to the survival of the fittest and social Darwinism philosophy. The strong are the only ones worthy of consideration and respect. If you want to survive in this cruel world, then you need to gain strength. Weakness is not an option. I am sure that a character like Chrollo would go as far as to conclude that the weak deserve to be punished and the strong should be rewarded. Chrollo defines an individual's strength and weaknesses through their nen abilities, as well as their mental and physical fortitude. We can appreciate that the beliefs that Chrollo has adopted were formed through his environmental and social conditions, as he was raised in Meteor City, an abandoned junkyard where everyone is just trying to survive. This environment certainly sounds like it adheres to the principles of survival of the fittest. Morality can be seen as an arbitrary, vague social construct. In other words, it is a loosely defined concept that depends on the discretion of those using it in order to determine its definition. I believe that this definition of morality is what suits Chrollo best. Through this belief, his perspective has been shaped. This explains why he must find it easy to order the other troop members to kill others so easily. Note how he wasn't afraid and didn't hesitate when he had ordered the Phantom Troupe members to kill all those who got in the way when they were about to loot the auction. He had also commanded the spiders to go absolutely crazy in order to avenge Uvagin and to take their wrath out on the mafia. Clearly, his sense of morality is defined by whatever action would benefit him the most in that particular moment, regardless of the consequences of this action. Each individual relies on their own sense of morality to guide their actions. There is no objective revelation like a holy book, a human rights charter, or constitution that defines morality completely. From the perspective of morality that Chrollo adopts, any offensive violence isn't necessary, but it can be justified. In the same context, murder may be morally wrong, but it is justified as long as it helps you to achieve your goals. The mafia use violence in order to keep their underground criminal organizations profitable. The government uses violence in order to maintain law and order. Even the Hunter Association partakes in violence in order to achieve its own goals. The only difference is that they operate within a legitimate structure and work their way into the mainstream. However, the Phantom Troupe's actions are considered villainous because they are outcasts and they operate on the edge of society. Chrollo views the world from this perspective of moral nihilism, and by extension the other members of the Phantom Troupe too adopt this ideological perspective. Uvagin is the perfect example of this, as he says that he has felt nothing for his victims, while Kurapika interrogates him. Because he is not chained by a moral compass or bound by any values, he feels that there are no consequences for his actions. As long as his actions, no matter how evil they are, lead to him fulfilling his goal, then he doesn't care even if the other members of the Phantom Troupe have to be sacrificed for this outcome. And this is where his morality and freedom can be compared to Kurapika's. Despite his feelings of hatred and revenge, Kurapika still adheres to moral principles. This is why he chooses to exchange hostages instead of allowing Gon and Killua to be killed. If he had given in to his feelings of revenge by killing the leader of the Phantom Troupe, the one who was behind the massacre of his clan, the freedom that Chrollo has is taken away from him by Kurapika at the end of the Yorknew City arc. Through his nen ability judgment chain, he was able to put restrictions onto Chrollo. Fittingly, through the justice chain, justice was enforced onto Chrollo for all of his atrocities and morally questionable activities that he had partaken in, all for the sake of actualizing the goals of his criminal group. Chrollo can also be described to adopt the philosophical view of pessimism, as he believes that there is no meaning or purpose to existence. This is why he accepts his death so easily when Kurapika captures him. He says that he feels at peace in a situation which would make an ordinary person tremble. Melody confirms that he is indeed telling the truth, and she is troubled by how unfazed he is by the situation. If he is indeed pessimistic, then he must believe that the best thing for a human to do is to not exist. If Kurapika kills him, then he is content, as his suffering suffering will end, and he won't need to maintain strength in order to survive in a cruel world. He hopes that the troop members would share this ideology. He reiterates that there is no value in keeping him as a hostage because these spiders can survive without a head. He also advises Pakunoda to notice that Kurapika is more concerned about his friends than his feelings of vengeance. He shares this information with her so that she may be able to use Kurapika's weakness against him. Chrollo believes that an attachment to anything or anyone is unnecessary. He believes that people are always striving for that which is out of reach. Even if they attain it, they are never fully satisfied, so it is best to detach yourself from relationships and material objects. This worldview is confirmed when the troop members don't find any items to steal at the auction house. Uvogin suspects that there might be a traitor amongst the spiders, but Chrollo tells him that there isn't a traitor, because none of the Phantom Troupe members care for money, glory, or prestige. Like I mentioned previously, the worldview that Chrollo adopts stems from the environmental and social conditions of Meteor City. In this place, there are no laws and no moral code. Because there is no law and order in Meteor City, any action, good or evil, is considered to be legitimate. In an environment like this, the belief of nihilism is easily adopted. This completely gets rid of the need to become attached to relationships and materialisms. These concepts are considered to be unnecessary because ultimately there is no meaning behind existence. The ideology of pessimism is born out of a lack of identity and through having no family. And this is the opposite of Kurapika, who has lost everything. He was born with a purpose and surrounded by people who loved him, but now having lost everything, his newfound purpose of revenge is justified by his moral belief that actions have consequences. Kurapika has indeed nothing to lose because he has lost everything, but it is Chrollo and the other members of the Phantom Troupe who have everything to lose, including their freedoms which they have adopted from their nihilistic worldview. It would be easy to come to the conclusion that Chrollo is a cruel, apathetic psychopath, but his character is slightly more nuanced than this. We do get to appreciate a rare glimpse of the humanity within his character. He may be committed to his behavior of detachment and his belief of pessimism, but he himself has formed an unorthodox bond with the other members of the Phantom Troupe, and Togashi demonstrates this through Chrollo shedding tears for Uvogin after he had heard Neon's prophecy confirming his death. We don't know if Uvogin was one of the founding members of the Phantom Troupe who had originated from Meteor City. Did he grow up with Chrollo and experience suffering through their shared environment? Even if he doesn't believe in bonds, it is hard for Chrollo to hide his emotions when it comes to the other spiders. He is affected to the point that he dedicates a requiem for Uvogin through deciding to kill the Mafia. Also, if you notice the wording of Neon's prophecy, it states that the calendar loses a precious component. The remaining months gather to mourn. The words precious and mourn were used. Through this prophecy, Chrollo comes to the realization that the other members of the Phantom Troupe may not strictly adhere to his ideology, and thus too will be affected emotionally by the death of Uvogin. And this is indeed proven when we see Nobunaga mourn for the death of Uvogin. Nobunaga is even willing to start a confrontation with Chrollo after he had decided that they are leaving Yorknew City. He confronts him because he wants vengeance for the death of Uvogin. Despite Chrollo's decision to not continue to pursue the chain user, Pakunoda decides to take Gon and Killua for the hostage exchange. The other members of the Phantom Troupe could have easily killed them and abandoned their boss and replaced him, but Pakunoda ultimately sacrifices herself by using her memory bomb ability to give information on Kurapika to the rest of the members. When she is alone with Gon and Killua, she even asks them why is it that they are not trying to escape, since her injuries won't allow her to catch up with them. It would be an ideal situation because the Phantom Troupe would lose their leverage and Kurapika would be able to kill Chrollo, but the boys explain that they don't want Kurapika to give in to his hatred because they know that it is making him suffer. Pakunoda was grateful for the decision that the boys had made because she doesn't want to lose the precious component of the Phantom Troupe, which is their head, Chrollo. Togashi always shows the human side to his villains or antagonists, and he turns them into very sympathetic characters. We see this in particular with Meruem in the Chimera Antark, and we see this here with the Phantom Troupe members. Ultimately, what is defined as good or evil is the character's intentions, and not the role that they are playing in the larger story. Chrollo has the power to steal other people's Nen abilities, and I feel like this symbolizes the identity issues that he has. Because of his upbringing in Meteor City, we can see that his Nen ability seems to fill a void of emptiness that he feels. Through stealing the abilities of others, he is indirectly stealing their identity, because each person has a unique expression of Nen, so by stealing their abilities, he is in a way stealing their identity. Having an identity is essential, as it shapes our personality and who we are. Did he realize that other people who had been raised in Meteor City were also searching for a meaning and purpose? And was it for this reason that he had formed the Phantom Troupe, as a way to fill that feeling of emptiness that they may feel, through having no identity of their their own. By being in the Phantom Troupe, they have one more thing to define their identity with. In addition to this, when Gon asks him how he can kill people who haven't done anything to him, Chrollo reflects on that question and ponders if it's the key to understanding himself. Hisoka mentions that other than killing and stealing, the Phantom Troupe even engage in philanthropy. When I had first watched Hunter x Hunter, I thought that he was being sarcastic, but now I'm not so sure. Could it be that the Phantom Troupe are Togashi's twisted version of the Robin Hood legend? A group of outcasts who are willing to steal from anyone and give back to Meteor City in order to maintain it. Robin Hood has a talent for disguising himself, and similar to the legend, Chrollo also puts on different disguises because he doesn't have an identity. The Nen abilities in his book are just a collection of different personas. Also, his Nen ability is called Bandit's Secret. You have to wonder if the Bandit's Secret holds the answer to the mystery behind his character. But unlike Chrollo, Robin Hood steals from the rich and gives to the poor because he is a generous person, whereas Chrollo steals objects and Nen abilities in order to break down systems and to introduce anarchy into the world. We are able to confirm this through his actions in the Yorknew City arc, but we cannot confirm any of the philanthropic activities that Hisoka claims that the Phantom Troupe partake in. Chrollo is surprised when the Zoldycks lose interest in the fight with him when the 10 Dons are killed, ending their contractual obligations. He is fascinated by how the assassins conduct themselves and the code of conduct that the Zoldyck family live by. Silver states that he refuses to work for nothing or die for nothing. After they leave, Chrollo is frustrated that he wasn't able to steal their powers. He was even contemplating to capture Silver Zoldyck. This highlights that Chrollo isn't only after Nen abilities and stealing material possessions, he will even resort to kidnapping people. When it comes to the members of the Phantom Troupe, Shalnak brings up the fact that Shizuku and Pakunoda have rare abilities, and that they cannot be replaced easily. It is also worth mentioning that each member within the Spiders has a different role, Nobunaga and Uvagin being the troupe's attackers, Shizuku, Pakunoda and Shalnak being information gatherers. The different members of the Phantom Troupe are prizes worthy of stealing in their own right, as each of them have very different personas and identities. They all serve to fill an empty void within Chrollo, giving himself a sense of identity by giving him a family to protect. Kurapika takes away a part of Chrollo's identity when he seals his Nen. Chrollo can no longer use the different Nen abilities that he has stolen, which represent different personas and different identities, which serve to add another layer of identity and meaning to Chrollo's character, which has now been forcibly taken away from him. Togashi has the ability to subvert tropes and cliches without compromising the flow of his story. The way that he writes his characters in service of his narrative is exceptional in my opinion. During the Yorknew City arc, Kurapika's character goes through a lot of change, and it is Chrollo and the members of the Phantom Troupe that are introduced into the narrative as the device to propel Kurapika through this change. And before you know it, by the end of the arc, Kurapika's character and the members of the Phantom Troupe perfectly complement each other. Each of them stand out as unique, relatable and realistic characters, who all appear to have strengths and weaknesses of their own that we can somewhat sympathize with. Now understandably, in an arc which is focused around Kurapika's character, I have talked a lot about Kurapika and the Phantom Troupe. But what about Gon and Killua, who we have been following very closely since the beginning of the story? It is no secret that they weren't given that much importance during this arc. Like I mentioned, the Yorknew City arc was a story about Kurapika, but Togashi does indeed use Gon and Killua in order to foreshadow and set up the upcoming arc, which is the Greed Island arc. During this arc, Togashi demonstrates that Gon and Killua still need guidance in the form of their friends and other acquaintances that they meet. Without the help of Leorio, they wouldn't have come up with an effective way to earn money. Without Zeppal, they lacked the experience and knowledge and would have been taken advantage of by the other antique sellers. Gon and Killua each have their own different interactions with the members of the Phantom Troupe. Togashi takes advantage of these interactions in order to demonstrate how weak Gon and Killua are when they are compared to other experienced Nen users. It is no secret, especially after the Heavens Arena arc where Gon was defeated by Hisoka, the two boys still have a lot to learn, especially about Nen. The gap in their compatibility, strength and intelligence is further emphasized when they are compared with the other members of the Phantom Troupe. Gon and Killua in a way are effectively made useless in this arc. They had failed in their attempt to track Machi and Nobunaga to the Phantom Troupe's base, and they could have been killed if Nobunaga didn't take a liking to Gon. We also get to see Illumi's influence on Killua, as we become aware that his first instinct is to run away whenever he comes across a powerful adversary. Togashi places this limitation onto Killua in order to make us curious as to how he will overcome it in the later arcs. Gon and Killua tried their best to be useful during this arc, even to the extent that they had tried to contact Kurapika and asked how they could assist him. It is unfortunate, but during this arc the two of them act as more of a burden to Kurapika than as a strength. Gon is well aware of this fact and it frustrates him. Gon is appalled by the actions of the Phantom Troupe, but he is even more frustrated that he can do nothing to stop them. If you were to ask me, Togashi had purposefully diminished the role of Gon and Killua in this arc in order to develop them later on as the story progresses. I personally loved getting a break from the two of them and getting to experience Kurapika first story, especially considering that his intention to become a hunter during the Hunter exam arc was one of the reasons why I was hooked onto the story of Hunter x Hunter. I wanted to know more about Kurapika and his journey, and indeed this arc delivered on all of the curiosity that I was feeling. On my last remarks on Gon and Killua, I loved how they were the silver lining for Kurapika, how they had diverted his attention away from his quest for revenge. They didn't want Kurapika to succumb to his hatred, and ultimately they did succeed, because Kurapika didn't give in to his darkness by the end of the arc. And now to wrap up my thoughts of the Yorknew City arc. I believe that this arc really was Togashi flexing his skills as an excellent storyteller. The odds felt realistic, the story had excellent pacing, and there was a genuine feeling of tension during some of the moments in this arc. And through his storytelling and the way that he writes characters, we get to experience how the protagonists have hints of evil within them, and how even villains are able to be humanized, so that you may sympathize even with their ordeals. Togashi really does build a fantastical world, which anyone would love to isekai into and explore, through the various different complex, sophisticated mechanics that he introduces, and the nuanced characters that he has created. Whether if they are protagonists or antagonists, Togashi is always challenging and subverting tropes and cliches. The narrative that stitches all of these elements together always has a natural flow to it. In addition to this, he really does make us think about the themes, ideas, and ideologies that he conveys through his in-depth story, and he leaves us with plenty of breathing space in order to interpret Hunter x Hunter the way that we want to. And this point in particular is one of the many reasons why I have truly come to love Hunter x Hunter after re-experiencing it during these videos. There is such a healthy difference of opinion, with some people favouring the Yorknew City arc as their favourite arc, or even others stating that the Greed Island arc is their favourite part of the story. Whatever the case, Togashi really has created an excellent world for us to dive into, one that introduces concepts and thoroughly explains them, and allows us to feel a world which feels like it is being lived in, with characters who are dealing with real-life issues and adopting differing ideologies and philosophies, which you can discuss for hours on end. I really did enjoy going over this arc again. If there are any points that I have mentioned that you've agreed with or disagreed with, then just let me know by continuing the conversation in the comments down below. In my next video, I'm going to be going over the next arc in the Hunter x Hunter story, the Greed Island arc, so subscribe and turn on the bell notifications to be the first one to watch the video when it drops. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, then please consider supporting my channel on Patreon. I have multiple tiers with rewards including access to an exclusive Discord server, video scripts, as well as being the first to know about unreleased upcoming videos. Thank you for your time, and whatever you choose to contribute I will appreciate, and it will mean a lot to me.